Half a day and good evening, everyone. The federal government is now partially shut down. The Senate has rejected a House bill that would have funded the government but delayed the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. KUAM's Danielle Nottingham has the latest from Washington.
They want to close government. This is all a subterfuge.
The new fiscal year started at midnight just as the last one ended, with a divided Congress in turmoil. The Republican-led House refusing to pass a bill that only funds the government, and the Democrat-controlled Senate refusing to consider anything else.
I dare you to do that.
There was no shutdown of rhetoric and partisan sniping on Capitol Hill Monday as lawmakers made their cases to colleagues from the floor and to the nearest cameras outside.
This is a matter of funding the government and providing fairness to the American people.
Speaker Boehner, pass our bill.
President Obama blamed the mess on Tea Party Republicans.
One faction of one party in one House of Congress, in one branch of government, doesn't get to shut down the entire government just to refight the results of an election.
The battle over the budget could just be a warm-up. In about 2 weeks, Congress will have to agree to raise the nation's debt limit, or the U.S. could default on its loans. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid said playing a political game with that would be a catastrophe. No agreement before Monday's midnight deadline means some 800,000 federal workers will be told to stay home without a paycheck.
Danielle Nottingham, KUAM Guam's News Network.
Now, despite the shutdown, post offices will remain open and Social Security checks are still scheduled to go out, but the nation's parks will close. Federally backed mortgages, passport, and visa applications will be delayed, as will gun permits.
Now, President Obama, meanwhile, delivered a message to members of the military, assuring those in uniform that they will remain on normal duty status, and those involved in military operations will continue to receive what they need to carry out their missions and will be paid on time. For civilian workers who have already suffered furloughs from sequestration, the president had this message.
You and your families deserve better than the dysfunction we're seeing in Congress. Your talents and dedication help keep our military the best in the world. That's why I'll keep working to get Congress to reopen our government and get you back to work as soon as possible.
Here at home around 2 o'clock this afternoon, the Navy Installation Command gave direction to begin an orderly shutdown and furlough notifications began. While base operations such as the commissary and Odea schools will not be affected by the shutdown, personnel under the Joint Region Marianas stationed at the Andersen Air Force Base and Naval Base Guam are. JRM Public Affairs Officer Lieutenant Matt Knight stresses the adverse impact this has on DoD personnel.
None of us are receiving a check until, or a paycheck until the Congress signs either a fiscal year 14 budget or a continuing resolution. So whether or not they're continuing to work, they're not working, there is a dramatic negative impact to all the Department of Defense for a government shutdown.
Approximately 100 civilian personnel are to be furloughed, as well as 170 non-essential Air Force civilians. Meanwhile, all active duty personnel will remain on normal duty status. Approximately 300 Navy and 200 Air Force exempted personnel will not be furloughed as they carry positions essential to the protection of life and property.
And just as most of the nation and the rest of the world was counting down to when the federal government would shut down, the anticipation was just as intense here on island. Ken Quintanilla has more on how the shutdown will affect us here at home.
Guam may be in a different time zone, but the first federal government shutdown in nearly 2 decades hit the island just as hard as those just waking up to the news in the mainland. Among those that will be hardest hit here at home, the Guam National Guard. In a statement from Adjutant General Major General Benny Paulino, he says approximately 140 military technicians, including federal employees who are also members of the Guam National Guard, soldiers and airmen on temporary orders, and federal and state civilian personnel may be temporarily furloughed. The Department of Defense has, however, provided guidance in which the Guard has already started prudent preparation to mitigate the consequences of the shutdown. And despite all the uncertainty, Paulino says the Guard's top priority will be to continue supporting requirements of its over 600 soldiers and airmen currently deployed in Afghanistan and Southwest Asia, along with their families. And like the Guard, the National Park Service has also been preparing for the inevitable as close to 24 of its workers will be furloughed.
We have approximately 21 employees that work here on the island of Guam that will be furloughed starting tomorrow after we're done with our closures.
National Park Service's Acting Superintendent Ron Bourne says these positions include interpretive rangers, maintenance and administrative and natural and cultural resource staff. He further apologizes to visitors and residents who access the parks, as they will have to be closed too beginning tomorrow.
What exactly will be closed is that our units that we have that normally are available to the public, which is the Aston Overlook, the Aston Beach Park, the Agate Beach Park, and of course our Visitors Center, will be closed to the public.
And despite being able to avoid it this year, District Court of Guam Chief Judge Francis Tidinko Gatewood says there's a serious possibility the court won't be able to avert furloughs this fiscal year. She says the shutdown will also put the court's operations on the chopping block.
As I understand it, if there is no budget, there's no resolution with regard to the budget on the Hill, then our court will be open for 10 days. And after that, we will have to go into critical services. What are critical services? We're going to try to define that, like if somebody gets arrested, of course.
The chief judge says she's in the middle of a 12-week jury trial and says payment to jurors is another added concern. Ultimately, she says it's a serious situation and hopes for some resolution.
These defendants have a constitutional right to a speedy trial. They have to have their individuals who file petitions, whether it's civil or criminal cases that are filed. Access to the court is paramount, and their constitutional rights will be violated.
She adds while the district court has already had to adjust its schedule to accommodate the U.S. Public Defender's Office, which has already undergone a furlough itself, she says it remains to be seen what it means for others like the U.S. Marshals, the U.S. Attorney's Office, Federal Protective Services, and other agencies affected in her court. Reporting for Guam's News Network, I'm Ken Quintanilla.
Thanks, Ken. Governor Eddie Bazacalvo, meanwhile, says his administration is assessing the impact the shutdown will have on the National Guard, Public Health, and the Behavioral Wellness Center. Calvo saying, quote, "It is a true shame that Congress and the Obama administration value politics over governance. Any day when elected leaders bicker to the point of shutting down the government is a sad day in American history indeed," end quote. The governor hopes the issue can be resolved before Americans and Guamanians are left without the help the federal government is supposed to provide.
Now, Guam's congressional delegate, meanwhile, says she shares the same frustration as many on Guam and across the nation. Madeline Berdallo is concerned the federal staffers and contractors who are furloughed and will not be able to receive the same retroactive pay offered during the last government shutdown in 1996. Berdallo says House Republicans chose to shut down the federal government and they remain unwilling to compromise. She said, quote, "Instead, they're using what should be a simple, common-sense vote on a spending bill to fund all operations of the federal government as a last-ditch effort to attach unrelated issues."